What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. What a day it was. We always knew that the first day of the legal tampering period was going to be a little bit crazy, which of course throughout the NFL it was. We also knew that to start this week, Green Bay was going to have to make a plethora of moves to get under the salary cap, which they started to do on Monday. There was a ton of news, a ton of notes, a ton of moves, a ton that we need to get to. So no niceties today, no warm up. We're jumping straight to the main event. We've got everything to cover. I'm going to start by going sort of in chronological order as everything happened on Monday. I don't know about you, but I wake up to the news that Davante Adams is unhappy with the franchise tag, that he will not play under the franchise tag this upcoming season, and is adamant to set up a long-term deal with the Packers. I also don't know about you, but if you've been paying attention at all, that did not come anywhere near as surprising. As I've been mentioning over the course of the last week plus, I thought it was unlikely that the Packers and Davante Adams would get a deal done before the start of the new year. Now, there's still a couple days left, I suppose, but it does not seem like that conversation is in a great place between Adams and the Green Bay Packers. And furthermore, I also mentioned the fact that I think this is going to get a lot uglier and a lot worse before it gets better. However, I absolutely believe that it'll get better and that both of these sides will ultimately work out an agreement before July when they absolutely have to do so. Otherwise, Green Bay is not allowed to extend him past that point, and then it gets really messy and Davante I don't think it's ever going to get to that point. It is way too beneficial to both of these sides to get some sort of long-term agreement done. Now, a lot of things can happen. There's a lot of dollars and cents at stake here. Green Bay's trying to be ultra competitive over the next two seasons. In a way, though, I think everything ends up setting up as rather beneficial for Green Bay. And what I mean here is Green Bay sort of knows, and I've been talking about this over and over, but 3, 4, 5 years from now, there's going to have to be sort of a readjustment period, probably a rebuild once Aaron Rodgers is gone, but at minimum, a readjustment period. And Green Bay's already putting so much money into those years that I think, a handful of extra million to Davante Adams during that time, I don't even know that it moves the needle all that much. So I know Russ Ball and Brian Gutekunst are going to want to be as conservative as possible. I just don't know. Like, at some point, you just almost have to say, all right, we've put all this money into the future. What's 5 to 10 more million for Davante Adams if we absolutely have to go in that direction to save more money now, to get under the salary cap, and to keep arguably a Hall of Fame player in his prime, playing at the best of his ability as you try to open up a 2-year window in Green Bay where you can potentially win a Super Bowl. They've done everything else to do that. It just seems that at some point this will also happen with Davante Adams. Meanwhile, for Adams, I think there were some beneficial things that happened on his side as well during the course of this free agency period. Mike Williams and Christian Kirk getting huge deals. Christian Kirk on Monday getting $21 million per year. Now, I know some of that is fake, but guess what? Some of it on a $30 million per year deal for Davante Adams will be fake as well. And if like when we look back and we talked about the DeAndre Hopkins contract and things like that, the difference in that was about $5 million, somewhere between about $22 million and $27 million as to how you sort of wanted to figure that out. And that all sounded good at the time. Green Bay, I'm sure, wanted to be closer to about the $22 million per year range. I'm sure Davante and his agent probably wanted to be closer to $27 million. Well, guess what? When all of a sudden Christian Kirk is now making $21 million per, the $27 million doesn't sound so bad anymore if you're Green Bay. And you can argue if you're Davante's agent that even more than that, 28, 29, or 30 mil per could potentially be in the cards. Not the Arizona cards, no pun intended there, but that could be something that could get worked out. So I still think there's a ways to go before this comes to some sort of closure. I would love to be wrong, and I would love for them to get something done sooner rather than later to open up potentially even more salary cap space, that they could potentially do a couple more deals here this week. I just don't necessarily see that as happening, but I have, at this point, less than 1% concern over any long-term issue between Davante Adams and the Green Bay Packers. Now, could that change? Could things get way worse? Sure, there's certainly some ways that could happen, but at this time, I still wholeheartedly believe that both of these sides have way too much invested in, with this team, with Aaron Rodgers coming back these next two seasons. Brian Gutekunst has clearly stated he wants Davante to be the highest paid wide receiver in football. He said that in a press conference. I just think there's too much common ground here for this to get to an ugly point where they have to rescind the tag or he has to get traded or anything like that. So we shall see. Time will tell, but that's how we started off the day. Not on a great tone, but again, nothing unexpected. And remember, there is some posturing here from Davante Adams and his agent on a day where they knew there was going to be big money contracts for receivers. This is a really important contract for Davante because, again, his next contract will come when he's over the age of 30. And yes, he's going to still be a really good wide receiver at that point, but this is his cash-in point. Even if it's a franchise tag and he's an unrestricted free agent next year, he's 1 year closer to 30, and the likelihood that he gets a massive monster deal, while still decent, it definitely takes a hit. And also, by the way, he could have some sort of injury, ACL, etc., which completely tanks his value. So this is a really important contract for Davante, and it's worth noting here as well. Davante has been the consummate pro. He is a leader on and off the field. He is the best receiver in football, future Hall of Famer. It just, again, I can't see a situation where these two sides don't get something hammered out and figure out a way for Davante to be back with Green Bay on a long-term deal that at least gets him in Green Bay these next 2 seasons and still meets the salary demands of Davante Adams above and beyond what he would have gotten on a franchise tag. So then, our second piece of news that we get on Monday is per Pro Football Network and Aaron Wilson that says Rasul Douglas is set to be back with the team and that they're expecting that Douglas re-signs with the Green Bay Packers, which sounded great at the time. And it started to be like, okay, if Douglas is back, that's probably not leaning in the right direction for De'Vondre Campbell. We'll see that the two aren't bound at the hip, right? If Douglas is back, it doesn't mean that Campbell's gone. If Campbell's back, it doesn't mean Douglas is gone. Both could be back, both could be gone, one or the other. There's a lot of different options that are available there, but you're starting to sort of go through the motions. But, it's easy to get excited that, all right, Douglas is going to be back. You have a cornerback room that consists of Jair and Douglas and Stokes. That's a great way to start a defensive backfield. However, it got a little bit cloudier then as the day went on. Bill Huber reports later in the day that something could still get done, but nothing is done as of this point. Rasul Douglas tweets out, not sure where you're getting your information from, not to Aaron Wilson directly, but just in general. And maybe he wasn't even referencing contract, but it certainly felt like he was referencing the whole contract situation. And at this point, nothing really to see here. We don't know, again, the report's still out there from Aaron Wilson that it's expected that Douglas remains with the Packers, which of course would be great news. And if we take that at face value, again, with what we're about to discuss with the remainder of Green Bay's day, you can start building a pretty darn good defense pretty quick with the talent that's in hand already for the Packers. But at this point, I don't think there's enough conclusive information as to what Rasul Douglas is going to do one way or the other. And we'll get to that other big signing in just a moment and what that could mean for the Packers and Rasul Douglas as well. Next up was Preston Smith. And this was a major piece of news and a big deal for Green Bay. Preston Smith going to be back with the Green Bay Packers. He ultimately signs a large deal, but this feels to me like a 2-year deal. It could be a 2 or 3 year deal, excuse me. His cap hit this year is going to be $11.46 million. His cap hit next year is going to be just a little bit over $13 million. What I think this is going to be is a 2-year, $31 million deal in total, with an $11 million cap hit basically this year, $13 next year, and then a $7 million dead cap after that when he's done playing with Green Bay. I think it's going to be a 2-year, $31 million deal. There's a chance it could also be a 3-year, $44.2 million deal with playing 3 years and then a dead cap in year 4. Either way, it's going to pay him about $15 million per season for either 2 or 3 years. And if he does play, 2 years with Green Bay, he's going to be 32 when he's a free agent and could get, well, not probably like a massive deal. He could still get a decent deal in his next, free agency. So I really like this deal for both sides. For Green Bay, and we'll get to in just a moment, with the Packers officially releasing Zadarius Smith, they had to get somebody back. And of course, it really made sense that it was Preston Smith in this capacity to team up Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary, who were really the top 2 edge rushers for Green Bay all last year, alongside Kenny Clark and Dean Lowry. We saw those 4 do work, and we'll see still what happens with Dean Lowry. I would expect him to be back. It's not a 100% guarantee, but we saw that group do really good work. And then, I still think there's room for potentially a Whitney Merciless to come back. We'll see what happens there. But that's your base for your starting defense. We saw them have success, and I think they can do that again. Preston also has some sack incentives once again, which really worked well for him last year. So I just think this deal makes a ton of sense for both sides. For Preston Smith, like I said, you're getting about $15 million per season for either 2 or 3 seasons. Have another chance to hit free agency after that. And for Green Bay, you get your edge rusher opposite Rashawn Gary. Again, if you're going in an all-in sort of season, the last thing you want to do is go, past this period with no Preston Smith, no Zadarius Smith, no Whitney Merciless, and just Rashawn Gary, and have to go edge rusher hunting, which is one of the most overpaid positions in football, or having to spend a first-round pick and don't even know if that player is going to be able to come in and contribute at the level that you want them to. Even when you spend a top 12 pick on Rashawn Gary, it takes a few years for him to get to the level that you're hoping for, right? So, you could go that direction. I would still expect, by the way, Green Bay to pick an edge rusher in round 1 or 2 to supplement Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith. I think they need better depth there, both now and in the future. But a huge deal for Green Bay to be able to get Preston Smith back. And that was sort of the first piece of really good news, because again, we had some ambiguity with Rasul Douglas as to exactly what was going to happen there. But Preston Smith coming back, huge piece of news, and love the tandem again with Rashawn Gary. And again, I just don't think I don't think you can view that as anything but a positive for Green Bay. Unfortunately, one Smith is in, another Smith brother is out. Immediately following that, Zadarius Smith it was announced that the Packers will release Zadarius Smith, and his time in Green Bay comes to an end. One of the more interesting case studies, I think, in Packers history as to what he brought to the team over a 3-year period of time. I do not say this as hyperbole or as an exaggeration. In my opinion, in my 30-ish years of watching Packers football, Zadarius' 2019 season defensively was as good as anything I've witnessed as a Packer fan. Leroy Butler, Reggie White, Charles Woodson, Clay Matthews, put any of them in that category. Zadarius Smith's 2019 was that good to me. The way he just took over games at times, made game-changing plays, like he was literally an unstoppable force for especially the second half of that season. It was so fun to watch him play, and it looked like Green Bay found a long-term franchise player that was going to be here, maybe not a decade because of when Green Bay signed him, but I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years and probably retire a Packer. And then he comes back the next season. And while he didn't have anywhere near the level of consistency that he did in 2019, still a leader on this defense and found a way to make 1 or 2 big plays in almost every game he played in. None bigger than the play against the Saints and Taysom Hill where he forces the fumble and they pick up a win in New Orleans because of that play. Like, you go and you watch him, and there were times he was just trying to do too much. He wasn't playing his assignment. Again, it wasn't as consistent, but you had all these flash and splash plays still that was really contributing to Green Bay winning football games. You were willing to look away and have some accident forgiveness on some of the plays where maybe the effort, the intensity, or just the focus wasn't quite as much there, because again, he would find a way to make 2 huge plays almost every game. The sack numbers were still good, and he was still, again, overall having a huge impact on this team. So you still felt pretty good about things. And then, but again, not quite to the level that he had in 2019. There was still like a steep decline. Sounds bad. He was really good in 2020, but he was so great in 2019. There was still a pretty decent step down in 2020 from what he was in 2019. And then 2021 comes. You've got this situation where he clearly wanted a long-term deal to make him a Packer for life. That was very, very clear. You had a disconnect between the Packers and Zadarius Smith. And then you had his captainship. He was no longer a captain. He gets his own necklace made with the captain C on it, like thinking that he was a captain. He has reportedly a back issue this entire time, like not really showing up not at practice a lot, things like that. Then he finally practices. He plays week 1 for, I think, under 20 snaps in that game, then is out the remainder of the season, has back surgery, comes back. It's announced that he's going to play in the playoffs. He plays, I think, a little under 10 snaps if memory serves. And I know everyone is super excited about when, I think on the first drive of the game, Zadarius Smith gets in and gets that sack and everyone's freaking out. Go back and watch that play. The guard that's defending him trips over his own man, and Zadarius sort of trips over him, but has, again, sort of enough athleticism just to get a hand on the quarterback and trip him up. It looks like this huge play for Z, but really it's 2 offensive linemen tripping over themselves. Wasn't a huge play. It was a huge play in the game, not something that like he earned, so to speak. And then he didn't do anything the remainder of that game. course, Green Bay loses that game, and he plays a total of 20 some snaps and 2 losses that he played in, and that's it. And Green Bay moves on. It sounds like there was some conversation with Z about keeping him in Green Bay on sort of the current money that he was set to earn, probably split out amongst numerous years with some sort of void. But ultimately, both sides decide that it was best to move on, which I think is probably the right call. I mean, make no mistake, you would have loved to see Z back in Green Bay, especially if he's healthy. But if he's looking for that big long-term deal, if there was already that disconnect between player and team, which I can't speak to with any sort of level of certainty, that's what it felt like. I can't, there's nothing I'm reporting on that. I haven't seen any reporting that there's like the two hated each other, anything like that. And again, they were still negotiating to potentially come back this season from reports. So I don't think it was that huge of a disconnect, but it still felt like one. Now you're getting to over age 30, just coming off a back injury and back surgery. You just don't want to be investing that much money in that type of player with that type of injury. I think it was wise for all parties to move on and make no mistake. I think Zadarius is going to get a pretty big deal in free agency, probably more than he was going to get from Green Bay. And I think Green Bay probably needed that money to do the Preston Smith and De'Vondre Campbell and everything else. So either way, Zadarius Smith's time with Green Bay comes to an end. And again, insane 2019, really good 2020. Injuries and everything else plagued him in 2021, which made him a complete non-factor. And that does it. Again, a really interesting case study for how you evaluate his time in Green Bay. But I'm never taking away that 2019 season, which again was arguably my favorite from any Packers defender that I've ever seen. Then we get word, one of the real, coin flips, what I would say is a coin flip going into, this offseason was Billy Turner. And I would have told you, I thought there was maybe 55%-ish chance, I think, maybe 60 that he was released. I didn't feel great about it. I thought there was a decent chance that it could have happened. But I also know that Rodgers and Turner are pretty close. And again, this is what I've talked about with Aaron Rodgers, where it's great that he and Tay are back and that those two guys want to get paid. But for Rodgers, the guys that this is going to affect are potentially the Billy Turners, the Mason Crosbys, the Randall Cobbs. Even if Mercedes Lewis and Crosby and Cobb and some of those guys are back, they're probably having to take pay cuts because Green Bay paid a ton of money to Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, which I'm sure Rodgers wanted Adams back and so on and so forth. So that's where, again, if you're the quarterback and you start making pleas for certain players and want guys back, it just gets very complicated very fast. In this case, Green Bay decided that they were going to move on from Billy Turner. And they save a couple $1 million on it, which is why I thought there was a chance that he could be brought back. I thought maybe they would renegotiate something. But in the end, Green Bay knows that every penny is going to count here. And even a couple million helps them in this season to try to get under the salary cap. I've never been, and most of you are probably going to know what I'm about to say, I've never been a huge Billy Turner guy. I just think he's been a nice player that you could pretty much plug in and not have to change your offense in regards to. I never thought he was this plus player. And now, to be fair, Mike Wall disagrees with me here, which means I'm wrong because I'm sure he's right. He's literally played the position and knows what he's looking at much more than I do. That said, to give myself a very small, minute amount of credit, I've watched every play for Billy Turner over the last few seasons, or since he's come to Green Bay. Every play, graded every play, and he's fine. And again, I have nothing against Billy Turner, and I will say this. Green Bay is going to absolutely miss his versatility, his ability to play left tackle, left guard, right tackle. And you pair that with the fact that Elton Jenkins is going to be out the start of the season and who knows how long for, and his ability to play all 5 positions. It's great for Matt LaFleur to say, hey, we want our best 5 guys out there, but you're able to do that because you've got 2 guys that can play almost anywhere along the offensive line. Heck, even Lucas Patrick, who's a free agent, could play left guard, center, right guard, right? So they had so many guys that they could line up in so many different spots. And yeah, Runyon could play left guard, right guard. Maybe Yash can play left tackle, right tackle. More on that in just a moment. You've got some guys who can move around a little bit. Royce Newman, left guard, right guard, maybe a little bit of right tackle. But they lose a ton of versatility in Billy Turner. And I will go back and say, when Turner signed that initial contract, I thought it was a bad deal for Green Bay, and I was very wrong on that. And even though I don't think he's been as good as maybe some people think over the course of his 3 years with Green Bay, I do think Green Bay got their return on investment for signing him. And again, his versatility is a huge part of that and what he's been able to bring. I thought I never would have expected that he would have been better at right tackle than he was at right guard, but he was definitely better at right tackle than he was at right guard. And again, his versatility and ability to move around, I thought was incredibly important for the Packers over these past few seasons. And that's something that Green Bay definitely loses out on. Now, very quickly here, I don't want to spend too much time on this because there's so much to go over, but I saw multiple tweets in regards to like, I can't believe that they're moving on from Turner. Then why did they even start him in that, at left tackle in the playoff game? And listen, the offensive line did not work out in that game. However, Billy Turner was probably one of the Packers' best offensive linemen in that game. Billy Turner graded out in that game per Pro Football Focus with a 69.2 grade. Yash had one grade all season over 69.2. So you might say like, you put Yash in and just let, whether you want Billy to sit that one out or move him to right tackle or whatever, like Billy playing in that game was not an issue. He had one of his better games of the season in that game. I had him graded as a neutral player in that game. Yash had, again, for me and my grades, I think he had 2 games over neutral all season long. Either way, like, again, Billy Turner was not the big issue in that game. Now, Dennis Kelly on the right side did not play well. However, he's matched up with Nick Bosa the entirety of that game. Guess what? Billy Turner, Yosh Nijman, anyone's probably not playing that great against Nick Bosa in that specific game and how well he played in that game. So while it blew up, and I'm not a huge Billy Turner defender, I thought Turner played fine in this game. I don't think that had anything to do with Green Bay's decision. I don't think, the ability of hindsight and saying like, well, they lost the game. I think there's a strong chance if you go with if you go with Turner at right tackle and Nijman at left tackle, that they play worse. I think, even if you go Dennis Kelly at right tackle and Yosh Nijman at left tackle, I think there's a chance they play worse. So I just think they didn't have a great solution for Nick Bosa, and that was the bigger issue. I don't think the left tackle, right tackle, who played where had much to do with that game at all. If anything, maybe Billy Turner could have neutralized Nick Bosa a little bit more. And again, I don't want to jump too far into this. I don't think it ultimately moves the needle all that much. And again, I know even in the benefit of hindsight that the offensive line did not play well in that game, but I don't think this move I just don't think it has any correlation. And I think going into that game, as much as, again, I'm not a huge Billy Turner believer, I don't think you can look back at that game and be like, well, Billy Turner was he played fine in that game. And again, Pro Football Focus and I both grading that game thought he played well. Now, more importantly, moving forward, what does this mean for the offensive line? I know a lot of people are already jumping to, does this mean that Yosh Nijman will be at right tackle moving forward? I think there's a very good chance that could happen. I would expect the start of the season, unless we get, some early draft picks, some draft picks even later that start playing really well. Maybe Dennis Kelly returns. Who knows, right? But as of right now, as we sit here today on March 15th, David Bakhtiari left tackle, John Runyon Jr. left guard, Josh Myers center, Royce Newman right guard, Yosh Nijman right tackle. Now, I don't love at all Yosh Nijman right tackle, Royce Newman right guard, next to each other. I think that has some potential real issues. And even then, Josh Myers at center. That Myers-Newman-Nijman could be a problem. Now, Rodgers gets the ball out of his hands quick, and that's his strong side and everything else. But you want to have a strong running game and everything like that. I think there's some concerns there. Now, eventually, your hope is that Elton Jenkins comes back, and then you have the option of Jenkins at right guard and Nijman at right tackle, or Newman at right guard with Jenkins at right tackle. So I think there's some options there. I know Green Bay's still going to build this offensive lineup. They're not just going to keep it as is. There's going to be probably maybe another veteran added. Again, maybe it's a Dennis Kelly, probably a couple guys through the draft at minimum. So that we're going to see them, build up this offensive line as much as possible. But in the meantime, I do expect Yosh to get some time at right tackle, again, unless there's a bunch of other moves that are made. Throughout the day, we also heard various rumors and buzz about Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and based on the wide receiver market, it seems like he's going to get paid. There are numerous teams that are interested in his services. I can't imagine where he doesn't get at least, 10 to 12 million per year based on going rates right now, and I just don't think Green Bay is going to be anywhere near that rate with where they're at right now. So if I had to guess, and based on the early reports, it would be fairly shocking at this point if MVS is back, which means that Green Bay is going to have a huge hole for deep threat and speed receiver in this offense, something that they're going to have to find with a cheap free agent wide receiver, which by the way, is not looking great at the moment. There are not very many cheap, deep threat wide receivers. Maybe you could get like a Deshaun Jackson on a cheaper deal because he's, later in his career, and maybe something like that. But man, he did not do much last year either for the Rams or for the Raiders. In fact, the Rams cut him mid-season. Like, that's not like, there's just not many cheap deep threat options. And then if you're going in the draft, again, you don't know what you're going to get. It's a little bit of a crapshoot for a first-year wide receiver. So that could be a major loss. We then heard some, buzz and rumors that Jarvis Landry, well, he is getting released by the Browns, but that Green Bay could have interest. I think it was Mike Garafalo said that Green Bay could be interested. Don't quote me on that. But then I think it was Josina Anderson, excuse me, that said Green Bay is not interested in Jarvis Landry. I can't imagine a scenario where Jarvis Landry is a Packer. And again, have been certainly wrong on some things before. Will definitely be wrong on things again. I can't envision a scenario where Green Bay has the funds or the resources or the desire to get Jarvis Landry. I fully expect Randall Cobb to be back in some capacity. They've got Amari Rodgers. Landry's a slot receiver. Like, there's only so many slot receivers you can roll out. You're going to use, Devontae in the slot at times. Alan Lazard had success in the slot. EQ, if you bring him back, has had success. Like, you need an outside wide receiver. You don't really need, and I know Jarvis will play some on the outside as well. It's not like he's just a one-trick pony on the inside, but clearly slot is where he's best. I just don't think it makes sense. I don't think that's the best use of Green Bay's resources. Would be shocked if that's the case. And again, per Josina Anderson, that is not going to be something that happens. Then we got the coup de grace, like the cherry on top of the sundae of all the news for Green Bay. De'Vondre Campbell is back. Kudos to Bill Huber for breaking that report ahead of everyone else. Major deal, 5-year deal for De'Vondre Campbell. What I think this is going to ultimately amount to is about a 3-year, $32.2 million deal when all is said and done. There are potential outs before that, after that, but I think it's going to be about a 3-year, $32 million deal. So about $10 million, $11 million per season is what it's looking like for De'Vondre. But the huge part is only a $4.24 million cap hit on this upcoming salary cap, which is a massive deal for Green Bay to have him on such a cheap deal this upcoming season. His second season isn't that exorbitant either. So Green Bay, again, opening up this window and getting De'Vondre Campbell back, just a masterclass by Russ Ball and Brian Gutekunst. This is not easy decisions to navigate, and I think it's really important that they not only were able to make De'Vondre Campbell a priority, but also make this contract happen and also make it cheap in the first year. Yes, again, all of these moves are going to have some long-term lasting effect on the Packers salary cap, but they are doing the best they can to keep their best, most talented players. De'Vondre Campbell was clearly one of those, a first-team All-Pro, and the fact that they were able to find him last year, 1-year, $2 million deal, put him in the right spot, get him playing at such a high level, and then retain his services is just good management. Great job by Brian Gutekunst and scouting staff and front office and Russ Ball by making this happen. You know that Matt LaFleur and, this entire coaching staff is just ecstatic to be able to get him back. He really solidified himself as one of the leaders on the team, calling the plays. And again, I don't know how anyone could not be anything but ecstatic to see De'Vondre Campbell back as a Green Bay Packer. He earned it. He deserves it. Yes, there's a little bit of risk in signing a player who had one good season basically throughout his career in a contract year to this deal. I just don't see De'Vondre having a major fall off. Is he going to be maybe as good as a first-team All-Pro again, maybe this year or next year? Maybe not, to probably not. But if he's anywhere close to it, this is a great deal for Green Bay. And again, I don't know how you could be anything but excited. And again, it just shows that Green Bay is willing to go after, and really a change in dynamic, right? After not spending money or resources or anything on inside linebacker, they saw what De'Vondre Campbell brought to the team last year and were able to keep him in the fold and really make sure that this defense can hopefully build upon what they started in developing, which I think can be a top-tier defense in 2022. To sort of recap everything that happened throughout the day, I'm not going to go through every one of those moves again, but you saw Green Bay start to get under the salary cap. By the way, they are not done yet. They still need to clear about $26.5 million in salary cap space per Ken Ingalls. Make sure to follow Ken on Twitter if you have not already. But about $26.5 million. Now, Aaron Rodgers, Randall Cobb, some things like that could still very much be in play there to get them under the cap. Maybe a Jair Alexander extension. Those sort of things could happen to get them there, but they definitely have some work to do. What I've noticed, especially with Preston Smith and De'Vondre Campbell, and what I very much expect with eventually Davante Adams, and certainly with Aaron Rodgers as well, is to keep things as cheap as possible this year and next year. It really looks like Green Bay is not trying to do an all-in, last dance this season. It looks like they're trying to open up a 2-year window. And again, we'll know a lot more specifically when, Aaron Rodgers signs his deal and we get the contract details, which I very much expect to happen either on Tuesday or Wednesday morning. But it looks, especially look at Devondre's, like it just looks like they're trying to keep these guys in tow for this year and next year, and maybe have a 2-year window, not just a 1-year window. That's kind of one of my big takeaways from Monday. So again, what's next for Green Bay? As I mentioned, they still have work to do to get under the salary cap. Aaron Rodgers extension fully expect to be completed in the next couple days. Could they extend Jair Alexander? That would be a big deal, making him potentially the highest paid corner in football. We'll see if that can get done sooner rather than later. Randall Cobb, some sort of cut or restructure is also potentially in the cards. And then they do have maybe some decisions to make on Randall Cobb, Mercedes Lewis, Dean Lowry, and Adrian Amos as well, as to whether or not they want to do some sort of restructure, maybe have them take a pay cut. They could cut any of them as well. I'd be shocked if Amos gets cut. I think Lewis and Cobb end up back with Aaron Rodgers in some capacity, whether that's for Lewis on his current deal with a restructure. Randall Cobb, I can't imagine he's anywhere near his current deal. I think they'll work out something as well, and I think Jason Wilde reported something as such also. So those are all things I would expect to be next. Meanwhile, Allen Lazard, I think will have some sort of restricted free agent tender, and then the exclusive rights free agents will get brought back, or decisions will be made on those players as well. Could we see a Davante Adams deal? I don't think so. Maybe, I don't know, 5% chance, but it just seems very, very unlikely. Could Rasul Douglas get a deal done? Possibly. I'm also interested to see what happens with De'Vondre Campbell and when that deal actually comes to fruition. If both sides trust each other, and feel free, anyone, to correct me if I'm wrong on this. I've looked at it, I've researched it. I don't see any reason why not. But if both sides trust each other, there's no reason they have to sign the deal, meaning De'Vondre Campbell and Green Bay Packers, before the start of free agency. They could wait till Friday, Saturday, Sunday, next Monday. Again, assuming they both trust each other to get the to finalize the agreement. I would have to assume Green Bay would be really shady if all of a sudden they backed out of the deal after saying like, hey, we just need a couple days to free up the space. There's just no way that Green Bay would ever do that. That's just not the way they operate. I think De'Vondre could feel pretty safe in assuming that. And De'Vondre Campbell and his agent have had the opportunity to shop with every team around the league, and he decided he wanted to come back to Green Bay. Now, I think ultimately they probably just get the deal done because it's always smarter just to get pen to paper and not have to worry about that stuff. But if both sides are very confident, that this deal is going to get done, and it doesn't really matter if it gets done on Tuesday or, Sunday, Green Bay could wait a little bit and wait to execute that deal until he's technically a free agent, and then, have a little bit more space and wiggle room to sort of maybe put a couple of these moves on hold until later in the week when they have a little bit more information as to where the market is on some things. So I'll also be interested to see when that De'Vondre Campbell contract actually gets executed, and if they actually hold off on it a little bit to, again, buy them a little bit more time than if they sign it before the start of the new league year. That does it mostly for Packer news. A really quick wrap up of some of the other moves throughout the day. As I mentioned on Twitter, usually this is the time where I have to remind everyone, or everyone's on Twitter sort of reminding everyone, hey, the team that spent the most in free agencies probably didn't win free agency. Like, they probably just overspent, and, you have to actually see how things play out in the field. I don't think anyone's confused with the day that the Jaguars had. They spent $229.5 million and had Christian Kirk, Brandon Scherf, Foyo Oluokun, Foley Fatukasi, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram to show for it. Yikes. That is a ton of money that they threw at some good play. Listen, Brandon Scherf's a good guard. Oluokun is a really good inside linebacker. Fatukasi is a very underrated defensive tackle. But yikes. I mean, major yikes. The amount of money. Just because you have money does not mean you should spend money. And you need to spend money on the right free agents. If they'd spend a bunch of money on Scherf and Oluokun, maybe got Fatukasi on a cheap deal. Like, even the deal that they gave him, I don't hate. But man, just doing all of it together, this team is, in my opinion, like, yeah, they can be better, but look at the AFC. The AFC's stacked, and I know they want to be really good under Trevor Lawrence's rookie deal. It just seems like they're maybe a year or two away from being, wanting to do that and do it the right way. This, to me, is not the right way. I thought this was a brutal day for the Jaguars and overspending money on meh players for the most part. I also, I've been literally talking up the Bears as much as it pains me to like, they're doing the right thing. They're purging salaries. They're getting, enough salary cap space. They're going young. They're working on competing for 24, 25, 26, etc. And then they sign Larry Ogunjobi to a big deal. What does that possibly do for you? Now, always be team sign good players. And I think Larry Ogunjobi is a good player, right? So whatever. But like, he doesn't help you in the first question you always have to ask yourself, right? Can you win the Super Bowl this year? If the answer is no, all right, then you have to ask yourself, all right, so we're going to sign Ogunjobi to a 3-year deal. Can we win a Super Bowl within those 3 years? Is he going to be able to help us do that? I would say the answer once again is no. And then at that point, the answer becomes you don't sign Larry Ogunjobi. If you're signing Larry Ogunjobi to a 3-year deal, a veteran defensive tackle who's 28 years old, who's going to be 31 by the end of this deal, to a year where you're not competing for Super Bowls within the length of that contract, then why are you signing it? To be moderately better? That makes no sense. What you do want to do in these situations is sign young players who are, flyer players who if all of a sudden they turn out really well, you have a resource that you could re-sign to a longer term deal or potentially trade off. You want like low risk, high reward type signings. Players who are 24, 25 years old, maybe were former first, second, third round picks, top 100 picks that just didn't work out in their first in their first go around, like oversign some of those guys to slightly bigger deals than what they should have, maybe should have gotten on the open market, hoping that you hit on 1 or 2 of them. And that again, then you can re-sign them to an extension. If everything goes perfectly with Larry Ogunjobi and he plays amazing, you get him at age 31 where you're trying to actually open up a window and you're overpaying for an overaged defensive tackle. Like there's just no upside here. Bears, you were on the right track, and then I just don't get this move at all. Thankfully, I don't have to compliment you anymore for all of your offseason moves. The Vikings apparently want to do a big deal with the defensive tackle every single season. Michael Pierce 2 seasons ago, Dalvin Tomlinson last year, now Harrison Phillips this year. And then they also, released Michael Pierce on the same day. So that deal never really worked out for them. Now they bring in another defensive tackle. So I guess the Vikings think that signing defensive tackles is the way to stop Green Bay. It hasn't worked for them so far. Got to say, I don't see this one working out for them either, but kudos to you for getting on the board with a Harrison Phillips signing. Gotta love Mitch Trubisky, likely the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Make no mistake, if you're a Packer fan, you want Mitch Trubisky to do well, because if the Bears traded up for the number 2 pick to draft Mitch Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes, and they completely failed Trubisky, they release him, and then he goes to another team and absolutely plays great with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It just puts so much more egg on the Chicago Bears face. So I think we can all become Mitch Trubisky fans as long as he remains in the AFC and playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Packers signed a MVP for a ton of money. The Steelers get an MVP, a Nickelodeon valuable player. I don't even know what it stands for significantly less money. So good for Mitch Trubisky. And I would be remiss not to end the day with talking about the return of TB12. No, not Tom Brady. Tim Boyle gets a huge 1-year, $2 million deal, $2 or $2.5 million, one of the two, to stay with the Detroit Lions. So TB12 is back, not just with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but TB12, Tim Boyle 12, is back with the Detroit Lions as well. Kudos to Tim Boyle for getting another contract with the Detroit Lions. No better way to end this episode than with that piece of news. That is going to do it for me today. A ton to go over. I feel exhausted from the day. Like I literally do. My Twitter thumbs are tired. We're going to recuperate. We're going to be back tomorrow. It's going to be a brand new day. Thank you so much for following me on Twitter. Thank you so much for following me here on YouTube. I always appreciate you. I'll be right back here tomorrow breaking everything down again. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.